He was screaming. Lorenzo Ricci, the most feared CEO in Europe, was tearing apart a room full of American executives at the Pierre Hotel, and nobody knew why. His translators were sweating. His partners were laughing nervously, and the deal of the century was about to collapse in flames. They called him crazy. They called him unstable. But they were wrong. He wasn't crazy. He was being betrayed, and the only person in the room who knew it wasn't a lawyer or a banker. It was the girl holding the champagne tray. One sentence in a forgotten dialect changed everything. This is the story of how Sienna Bennett became the only woman to silence the devil. The crystal chandelier inside the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel in Manhattan didn't sparkle. It glared. To Sienna Bennett holding a silver tray laden with crystal flutes of Dom Perignon, the light felt like an interrogation lamp. "Keep moving, Bennett," the floor manager, a sweaty man named Mr. Henderson, hissed into her ear. "Table 4 is empty. Refill, and for God's sake, stay invisible. The Italians are already causing a scene." Sienna adjusted her grip on the tray, her knuckles white. Invisible. That was her specialty. At 24, Sienna had mastered the art of being part of the furniture. She was just a uniform, a pair of black flats, and a polite nod. Nobody at this gala, a high-stakes merger celebration between the American conglomerate Sterling Vanguard and the Italian luxury titan Ricci Automotive, cared about the waitress. They didn't know she had a degree in Romance languages from NYU that she couldn't afford to use. They didn't know she was working 3 jobs to pay off the debts her father left behind when he vanished. Sienna approached table 1, the epicenter of the tension. The air here was thick, smelling of expensive cologne and aggression. Seated at the head was Jordan Sterling. He was the golden boy of American finance. Handsome, 50, with a smile that looked like it was carved out of marble. He was speaking loudly and jovially to his board members. Opposite him sat Lorenzo Ricci. Sienna had seen pictures of him in the Wall Street Journal, but the photos didn't do justice to the sheer kinetic energy radiating off him. He was younger than Sterling, perhaps 34, with dark hair swept back and eyes the color of burnt espresso. He wasn't sitting. He was pacing behind his chair, his hands moving violently as he barked rapid-fire sentences at his translator. "Tell him the valuation is wrong," Lorenzo shouted in English, his accent heavy and thick with rage. "The numbers. The fool assets." He struggled for the word, reverting to Italian, spitting it out like a curse. "Damn it. The Turin plants are not for sale." Lorenzo's personal translator, a weaselly man named Paolo, looked at Jordan Sterling, then back at Lorenzo. Paolo cleared his throat. "Mr. Ricci's concerned about the schedule," Paolo said in smooth English to Jordan Sterling. "He is worried the timeline is too aggressive." Sienna froze. She was pouring water into a crystal goblet, but her hand stopped. "That wasn't what he said. He said the plants aren't for sale." Jordan Sterling smiled, taking a sip of his scotch. "Tell Lorenzo not to worry. The schedule is flexible. We just need his signature on the preliminary asset transfer." Paolo turned to Lorenzo and spoke in Italian, smoothly glossing over the contract. "It's just a formality." Sienna's breath hitched. It was a lie. A bold-faced, catastrophic lie. Paolo was translating incorrectly on purpose. He was working for Sterling. They were tricking Lorenzo into signing away his family's manufacturing plants in Turin under the guise of a formality. Lorenzo looked suspicious. He ran a hand through his hair, his chest heaving. He looked isolated, a wolf surrounded by hunters, and his own guide was leading him into a trap. He slammed his fist on the table, rattling the silverware. "Non credo," Lorenzo roared, his voice cracking with frustration. "I don't trust this. Something is wrong. Does no one understand me here?" The room went silent. The American executives exchanged amused glances. To them, this was just the passionate Italian throwing a tantrum. Jordan Sterling chuckled. "Someone get him a drink. He's overheating." Mr. Henderson shoved Sienna forward. "Give him the water," he whispered harshly. Sienna stepped into the circle of fire. She placed the water glass down in front of Lorenzo. He didn't even look at her. His eyes were laser-focused on Jordan Sterling's smug face. Lorenzo muttered under his breath, a low, guttural string of words in a very specific, rough dialect. Not standard Italian, but the street dialect of Naples where his mother was from, a dialect he used when he wanted to curse the world without the polished suit's understanding. "These snakes are slaughtering me, and I don't even have a knife. It broke Sienna's heart, the raw vulnerability in that voice. He wasn't a billionaire in that moment. He was a man alone. Without thinking, without remembering her station, Sienna spoke. She didn't speak loudly. She didn't make a scene. She simply leaned in as she wiped a non-existent spot from the table and whispered in perfect fluent Neapolitan. "The knife is held by the one on your right, sir. The translator is lying. Clause 4B sells everything." Lorenzo went still. It was a terrifying stillness. The frantic motion ceased instantly. Slowly, terrifyingly, Lorenzo Ricci turned his head. He didn't look at the translator. He didn't look at Jordan Sterling. He looked at the waitress in the ill-fitting black vest. His eyes locked onto hers. For a second, Sienna felt like she was staring into the barrel of a gun. The shock on his face was replaced by a dawn of comprehension and then a cold, lethal fury. "Excuse me?" Jordan Sterling asked, annoyed by the pause. "What's the holdup?" Lorenzo didn't break eye contact with Sienna. "Ripetilo," he commanded her softly. "Repeat it." Sienna's heart hammered against her ribs. She was going to be fired. She was going to be blacklisted. But she saw the desperation in his eyes. "Clause 4B, she said, switching to English, but keeping her eyes on Lorenzo. "It categorizes the Turin manufacturing plants as liquidatable assets, effective immediately upon signature. Your translator told you they were removed." He lied. The silence that followed was heavier than the chandelier above them. Paulo, the translator, turned pale. She is a waitress. She doesn't know business context. She is crazy." Lorenzo stood up. He didn't scream this time. He was eerily calm. He picked up the contract lying on the table, flipped to page 12, and scanned it. He didn't need to read English perfectly to recognize the asset codes. He saw it. Turin Plant 01. Turin Plant 02. Lorenzo closed the folder. He picked up the heavy crystal glass of water Sienna had just poured, and he threw the contents directly into Paolo's face. "Get out," Lorenzo said, his voice low and dangerous. "Before I kill you." Paolo scrambled back, knocking over his chair, and fled the room. Lorenzo turned to Jordan Sterling. The American CEO's smile had vanished. "The deal is dead," Lorenzo said, his English suddenly seeming much clearer now that he wasn't relying on a traitor. "And you, Jordan Hennon, you have made a very powerful enemy." Lorenzo turned on his heel to storm out, his entourage scrambling to follow. But after 3 steps, he stopped. He turned back to the table where Sienna was standing, trembling, clutching her serving tray like a shield. The entire room was staring at her. Mr. Henderson looked like he was about to have a stroke. Lorenzo walked back to her. He towered over her, smelling of sandalwood and ozone. "What is your name?" he asked. "Sienna," she whispered. "Sienna Bennett." "Sienna Bennett," he repeated, testing the syllables. He reached into his tuxedo jacket, pulled out a black card with gold embossing, and placed it on her tray. "Be at this address tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. Do not be late." I have a shift, sir," she stammered. Lorenzo looked at Mr. Henderson, who was cowering nearby. "She resigns," Lorenzo said, "effective immediately." He looked back at Sienna. "You are the only person in this city who speaks my language, Sienna. Tomorrow." He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and marched out of the ballroom, leaving Sienna standing amidst the wreckage of a billion-dollar merger with every eye in New York's elite fixed on her. The address on the card led to the penthouse of the 432 Park Avenue Tower. It was a building that pierced the clouds, a needle of concrete and glass looking down on the rest of the world. Sienna stood in the private elevator, her hands shaking. She was wearing her best outfit, a navy blue blazer she'd found at a thrift store, and a pair of gray slacks. It was a far cry from the couture she had seen on the women at the gala the night before. Why had she come? "Because you have 40 now is your bank account, and rent is due in 3 days, she reminded herself. "And because of the way he looked at you." The elevator doors slid open directly into a living room that was larger than her entire apartment building. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, revealing a panoramic view of Central Park. The furniture was sparse, modern, and Italian. Lorenzo Ricci was standing by the window talking on the phone. He was wearing a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, no tie. He looked tired. He hung up the phone as she stepped in. He didn't smile. "You are 5 minutes early," he said. "Good." "Mr. Ricci," Sienna said, clutching her purse, "I want to be clear. I didn't mean to cause trouble last night. I couldn't watch them do that to you." Lorenzo walked over to a glass table where a silver coffee service was waiting. He poured 2 espressos. Sit. It wasn't a request. Sienna sat on the edge of a white leather sofa. Who sent you? Lorenzo asked. Sienna blinked. Excuse me? Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. A waitress at the Pierre who speaks fluent Neapolitan dialect, understands contract law, and just happens to be at my table when my partners are defrauding me. It is a very convenient coincidence. No, Sienna felt a flash of anger. It wasn't convenient for me, Mr. Ritchie. I lost my job. I can buy the hotel and hire you back if that is your worry, he dismissed. Answer the question. Who do you work for? Is it Vanguard or perhaps my cousin Matteo? I work for no one, Sienna said, her voice firming up. I learned Italian because my grandmother was from Naples. She raised me after my parents died. She refused to speak English in the house. As for the contract law, I read a lot, and I'm not stupid. Lorenzo studied her face. He was looking for a lie. He was a man who had been trained since birth to spot deception, a survival mechanism in the cutthroat world of European automotive dynasties. Your grandmother, Lorenzo said. What was her name? Isabella Rossi, Sienna lied. It was a reflex, a necessary protection she had carried since she was a child. Her real grandmother's name was a secret she kept buried deep for reasons she barely understood herself. Only that her father had warned her before the accident. Never tell the Italians who you really are. Lorenzo paused at the name Rossi. It was common, generic. He seemed to relax slightly. Okay, he said. He took a sip of his espresso. Let's assume you are telling the truth. That makes you a rare commodity, Sienna Bennett. He slid a folder across the table toward her. What is this? She asked. An employment contract, Lorenzo said. My previous executive assistant and my translator were, let's say, relieved of their duties last night. I have a war to fight against Jordan Sterling. I cannot trust anyone from the agencies. They are all bought. Sienna opened the folder. Her eyes widened at the salary figure. It was more money in a month than she made in 2 years. I need someone who understands the language, Lorenzo said, stepping closer. But more importantly, someone who understands when I am being lied to. You heard what Paolo hid from me. You saw the trap. You have good instincts. I'm not a corporate spy, Sister Sweet. A corporate spy, Mr. Ritchie. I'm a waitress, Sienna said, though her hand lingered on the paper. You were a waitress, Lorenzo corrected. Now you are my executive liaison. Your job is simple. You go where I go. You listen to what I hear and you tell me the truth no matter how ugly it is. And if I refuse? Lorenzo walked to the window, looking out at the city that wanted to eat him alive. Then you walk out that elevator, back to your life, and I face the sharks alone. And perhaps they succeed in destroying a company my grandfather built with his bare hands 70 years ago. He turned back to her. The arrogance was gone, replaced by that same vulnerability she had seen at the gala. I am a stranger in this country, Sienna. I have enemies in Italy and enemies in New York. I need an ally. Sienna looked at the contract. She looked at the man who was asking for her help, not demanding it, but asking. She thought of her father, a man who had been destroyed by corporate greed. She thought of the way Jordan Sterling had laughed while plotting to ruin this man. Sienna picked up the pen. I have one condition, she said. Lorenzo raised an eyebrow. Oh, you are negotiating already. I don't just translate, she said. If I see something wrong, I speak up. In the public, in private. I'm not a servant. If you want a yes man, hire another Paolo. A slow, genuine smile spread across Lorenzo's face. It transformed him, making him look devastatingly handsome. Deal, he said. Sienna signed the paper. Good, Lorenzo said, snatching the folder back. Pack a bag. We are leaving for the Hamptons in 2 hours. The Hamptons? Sienna asked, startled. Jordan Sterling is hosting a charity polo match this weekend, Lorenzo said, his eyes hardening into cold flint. He thinks I am retreating. He thinks he won. Lorenzo checked his watch. We are going to crash his party, and you, Sienna, are going to help me burn his reputation to the ground. Sienna stood up. Her heart was racing. She had just signed a deal with the devil, but for the first time in her life, she felt like she was holding the pitchfork. I'll be ready, she said. But as she walked to the elevator, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was an unknown number. She waited until the doors closed to check it. The text message was short. I saw you on the news footage from the Pierre. I know who you really are. Does Lorenzo know his new assistant is the daughter of the man who tried to kill his father? Sienna dropped the phone. Her blood ran cold. Someone knew. The secret she had protected for 10 years was out. and she was now trapped in a glass cage with the one man who would hate her most if he found out the truth. The elevator descended, but Sienna felt like she was falling into a nightmare. The helicopter ride to East Hampton was deafening, but the silence between Sienna and Lorenzo was louder. Sienna clutched her phone, her thumb hovering over the delete button of the mysterious text message. Does Lorenzo know his new assistant is the daughter of the man who tried to kill his father? She couldn't delete it. It was evidence. But who sent it? She stole a glance at Lorenzo. He was looking out the window, his profile sharp against the blue sky. He looked invincible. If he knew that her father was Anthony Bennett, the former CFO of Ritchie Automotive's American branch, the man accused of embezzling millions and cutting brake lines on the senior Ritchie's car 15 years ago, Lorenzo would throw her out of this helicopter himself. "You're shaking," Lorenzo said, his voice cutting through the headset. Sienna jumped. I'm just cold, and I've never flown before." Lorenzo looked at her. For a moment, his dark eyes softened. He reached over and adjusted the climate control dial. "We are landing in 10 minutes. A stylist is meeting us at the rental estate. You cannot walk into a Sterling event wearing—" He gestured vaguely at her thrift store blazer. "It's practical." "It's armor made of cardboard," Lorenzo countered. "We are going into battle. You need steel, or in this case, silk." The estate Lorenzo had rented was a sprawling modernist mansion on the dunes. Waiting inside was a team of 3 stylists. They descended on Sienna the moment she stepped through the door. An hour later, Sienna stood before a full-length mirror. She barely recognized herself. She was wearing a structured, cream-colored dress by Roland Mouret that hugged her curves but remained strictly professional. Her hair, usually pulled back in a messy bun, was blown out in soft waves. She wore oversized sunglasses and nude heels that cost more than her car. Lorenzo walked into the room, adjusting his cufflinks. He stopped. His gaze traveled from her shoes to her eyes. He didn't whistle or leer. He simply nodded, a look of intense satisfaction on his face. "Perfect," he said. "Now you look like someone who can destroy a merger with a whisper. Let's go." The charity polo match was held at the Sterling Estates. It was a sea of white tents, green grass, and people who had never worked a day in their lives. When Lorenzo's black SUV pulled up, the atmosphere shifted. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Lorenzo Ritchie is here. After yesterday." They stepped out together. Sienna walked half a step behind him, her senses on high alert. Jordan Sterling was holding court near the VIP tent, a champagne flute in hand. When he saw Lorenzo, his smile didn't waver, but his eyes went cold. "Lorenzo," Jordan called out, his voice booming. "I didn't think you'd show your face. I assumed you were on a plane back to Italy to lick your wounds." The crowd quieted, waiting for the explosion. Lorenzo smiled, a dangerous shark-like grin. "I enjoy the American countryside too much to leave so soon, Jordan. Besides, I wanted to introduce you to my new vice president of strategy." Lorenzo stepped aside and gestured to Sienna. Sienna felt 50 pairs of eyes land on her. She kept her chin high. Jordan blinked, recognizing her. The waitress. The help. He laughed, looking around for validation from his sycophants. "This is a joke, right? You promoted the catering staff." "Sienna," Lorenzo said softly, "translate Mr. Sterling's sentiment for me, would you? But correct the inaccuracies." Sienna stepped forward. She looked Jordan Sterling in the eye. "Mr. Sterling is expressing his surprise," Sienna said, her voice clear and carrying across the lawn. "However, he seems to have forgotten that in 2008, his own grandfather started as a mailroom clerk before acquiring the company. He is also forgetting that under New York labor laws, referring to an executive as the help constitutes a hostile work environment, which could be problematic for the 3 pending harassment lawsuits Sterling Vanguard is currently trying to settle out of court." The silence on the lawn was absolute. Jordan Sterling's face turned a violent shade of red. The 3 lawsuits were a rumor, a tightly guarded secret. How did she know? Sienna didn't know for sure. She had overheard a frantic phone call between 2 lawyers in the bathroom at the Pierre the night before. It was a gamble, and it paid off. Jordan cleared his throat, his smile vanishing. "Enjoy the match, Lorenzo." He turned and walked away fast. Lorenzo leaned down to Sienna's ear. "Remind me to give you a raise." "I haven't even gotten my first paycheck yet," she whispered back. They moved through the crowd, a united front. Lorenzo introduced her to bankers, politicians, and socialites. Sienna navigated the conversations effortlessly, switching between English, Italian, and French, when a diplomat from Paris approached them. She was charming, sharp, and attentive, but she felt eyes on her. Not the admiring eyes of the crowd, but a malicious stare. Halfway through the second chukker of the match, Lorenzo went to speak with a potential investor from Dubai. Sienna excused herself to find the powder room. She needed a moment to breathe. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by the dread of the text message. She entered the cool, marble-tiled restroom inside the clubhouse. It was empty. She splashed cold water on her wrists. "You can do this," she told herself. "Just get through the weekend, get the first check, and move your mom's ashes to a better crypt. Then you can disappear." The door to the restroom opened. Sienna dried her hands and turned, expecting another guest. Instead, a man walked in. He locked the door behind him. He was tall, with black hair and a nose that looked like it had been broken once. He wore a suit that was too shiny. Sienna recognized him immediately from the family photos she had researched. It was Matteo Ricci, Lorenzo's cousin, the man who ran the European distribution arm, the man who had always wanted the CEO chair. "Signorina Bennett," Matteo said, his voice oily. He spoke in Italian. "Te ripulita bene." You cleaned up well. "This is the ladies' room," Sienna said, backing up against the sink. "Get out." Matteo laughed. He pulled a phone from his pocket. "I sent you a message this morning. You didn't reply. Very rude." Sienna's heart stopped. "You," she whispered. "I have been looking into Lorenzo's new pet," Matteo said, stepping closer. "I have a private investigator who is very thorough. Imagine my surprise when he told me that Sienna Bennett is actually Sienna Rossi, daughter of the late Anthony Bennett." Matteo leaned in, his breath smelling of cigars. "Your father stole 20 million euro from our family. He tried to cut the brakes on my uncle's Maserati. My uncle survived, but he was never the same. Lorenzo hates Anthony Bennett more than he hates the devil." "My father was innocent," Sienna said. Miss said, her voice shaking but defiant. "He was framed just like Matteo is trying to frame you now." "It doesn't matter what is true," Matteo sneered. "It matters what Lorenzo believes. If I tell him who you are, he will not only fire you, he will destroy you. He will sue you for fraud. He will make sure you never work again." "What do you want?" Sienna whispered. Matteo smiled. "I want the files. Lorenzo is meeting with the Dubai investors to privatize the company, cutting me out. I want the access codes to his private server. You will get them for me." "I can't," Sienna said. "Then tonight," Matteo said, checking his watch, "at the gala dinner, I will stand up and make a toast, and I will tell everyone who you really are." He unlocked the door. "You have until midnight." Matteo walked out, leaving Sienna alone in the silence, the reflection in the mirror showing a woman who was slowly cracking apart. The evening gala was a masquerade. It was fitting, Sienna thought, as she adjusted the black lace mask over her eyes. Everyone here was hiding something. She was just hiding the biggest lie of all. The ballroom at the Sterling estate was transformed into a Venetian carnival. Acrobats hung from silks in the ceiling. Opera singers performed arias on the balcony. Lorenzo was waiting for her at the bottom of the grand staircase. He wore a tuxedo and a simple black domino mask. When he saw her descending in her crimson gown, he stopped checking his phone. He offered her his arm. "Are you all right?" he asked as they walked into the crush of bodies. "You have been quiet since the polo match." "Just a headache," Sienna lied. "I have aspirin in their car," Lorenzo said immediately. "Or we can leave. We made our point." "No," Sienna said quickly. If they left, she couldn't get the information Matteo wanted. But if she did get the information, she would be betraying the only man who had treated her with respect in years. "We stay," she said. "You have to close the Dubai deal." Lorenzo looked at her with a strange intensity. "You are very dedicated for someone I hired yesterday." They danced. Lorenzo led her onto the floor for a waltz. He was a strong dancer, holding her firmly, his hand warm on the small of her back. The music swelled, a haunting violin piece. "Sienna," Lorenzo said quietly, pulling her slightly closer than necessary. "I realize I never asked you about your family." Sienna missed a step. Lorenzo caught her effortlessly. "There is not much to tell," she said, her throat tight. "My parents died when I was 14. Car accident." "I'm sorry," Lorenzo said. His voice was thick with genuine empathy. "My father? He died 2 years ago, but he was sick for a long time before that. Injuries from an accident years ago." Sienna looked down. She knew her father was blamed for those injuries. "He was a hard man," Lorenzo continued, "but he taught me one thing: loyalty is rare. When you find it, you protect it with your life." He looked into her eyes through the holes of his mask. I feel I can trust you, Sienna. Don't ask me why. I just do. The guilt hit her like a physical blow. She wanted to pull away, to run, to confess. Lorenzo, she started. Suddenly, a waiter bumped into them, spilling a tray of drinks. It was planned chaos. In the confusion, Sienna felt a hand grab her wrist and pull her away from Lorenzo. It was Matteo. He dragged her behind a heavy velvet curtain near the terrace doors. Tick-tock, Cinderella, Matteo hissed. The Dubai investors are meeting him in the library in 20 minutes. He keeps the tablet with the server keys in his jacket pocket. Get it. He trusts me, Sienna pleaded. Please don't make me do this. He trusts a ghost, Matteo spat. Do it, or I go to the microphone right now. He shoved her back out onto the floor. Sienna stood there trembling. She saw Lorenzo looking for her, scanning the crowd. He spotted her and started moving toward her, concern on his face. I have to do it, she thought. I have to save myself. Are you hurt? Lorenzo asked, reaching her. That clumsy idiot. I'm fine, Sienna said. She forced a smile. Lorenzo, you have the meeting with the Dubai team. You should go prepare. Yes, Lorenzo sighed. He patted his jacket pocket. The future of the company is in here. Let me help you with your tie, Sienna said. She reached up, fixing his bow tie. It's crooked. Lorenzo stood still, letting her touch him. He looked down at her lips. The air between them crackled with electricity. He leaned in just an inch. Sienna's hand slipped into his inner jacket pocket. She felt the cold metal of the thin tablet. She looked at his eyes. They were open, vulnerable, looking at her with hope. He trusts you. Sienna's hand froze. She couldn't do it. She couldn't be the person they said her father was. If she stole this, she was proving Matteo right. If she didn't, Matteo would destroy her. But if she told the truth, maybe, just maybe, she could control the explosion. Sienna pulled her hand back, empty. Lorenzo, she said, her voice steady now. We need to talk. Now, in private. Can it wait? He asked. The meeting? No, she said. It's about Matteo, and it's about me. Lorenzo's expression hardened at the mention of his cousin. Come with me. He led her not to the library, but to the terrace, away from the prying ears. The night air was cold. What is it? Lorenzo asked. Sienna took a deep breath. She took off her mask. Matteo cornered me, she said. He wants me to steal your server keys. He wants to sabotage the Dubai deal. Lorenzo's face went dark. I knew he was a snake, but to try to use my staff. He clenched his fists. Thank you for telling me, Sienna. You have done the right thing. There's more, Sienna said. Tears pricked her eyes. He's blackmailing me. With what? Lorenzo asked, stepping closer. Whatever it is, I will fix it. Does he have photos, debts? He has my birth certificate, Sienna whispered. Lorenzo stopped. I don't understand. My name isn't Sienna Rossi, she said. She looked at the ocean, unable to face him. My name is Sienna Bennett. Anthony Bennett was my father. The silence that followed was worse than any scream. The sound of the waves crashing against the shore seemed to amplify. Sienna turned back to look at him. Lorenzo had stepped back. The warmth was gone from his face, replaced by a look of absolute horror and then betrayal. Bennett, he choked out, the man who put my father in a wheelchair. The man who embezzled the pension fund. He didn't do it, Sienna cried. He was framed, just like Matteo is trying to frame you now. Stop, Lorenzo roared. It was a sound of pure pain. You are his daughter. You have been lying to me since the moment we met. The dialect, the legal knowledge. It was all a game. You were planted here. No, she pleaded. I met you by accident. I saved you. Did you? Lorenzo laughed bitterly. Or was it a long con? Did Matteo send you, or are you working with him to finish what your father started? Lorenzo, please listen. He recoiled as if she had burned him. Do not touch me. He looked at her with eyes that were now completely dead. You have 5 minutes to leave this property, Lorenzo said, his voice ice cold. If I ever see you again, Sienna Bennett, I will have you arrested for corporate espionage. I will bury you so deep the sunlight will never find you. Lorenzo, go, he screamed. Sienna turned and ran. She ran through the ballroom, past the masked dancers, out the front door, and into the dark, winding driveway. She kicked off her heels and ran barefoot on the asphalt. Tears streamed down her face, ruining the makeup, ruining the silk dress. She had done the right thing. She had told the truth, and it had cost her everything. As she reached the main road, a sleek silver sports car pulled up alongside her. The window rolled down. It was Matteo. He was smiling. You should have stolen the tablet, Sienna, he said. I saw you on the terrace. He didn't take the news well, did he? Sienna kept walking, sobbing. Get in, Matteo said. I'm not done with you yet. You know too much now. And since Lorenzo has discarded you, you work for me. I will never work for you, Sienna spat. Matteo's smile faded. Look at your phone. Sienna pulled her phone out. A news alert had just popped up. Breaking news. Lorenzo Ricci accused of fraud. Anonymous source leaks documents linking Ricci CEO to money laundering scheme. I didn't need the tablet to hurt him, Matteo said, checking at his fingernails. I just needed him distracted enough to miss the upload from his own office in New York. While he was yelling at you, my team bypassed his remote firewall. Matteo looked at her. He is finished. By tomorrow morning, Ricci Automotive stock will be zero. And since you are the executive liaison with no background check, guess who the police will think helped him do it? Sienna stared at the screen. Matteo had framed Lorenzo, and he had set Sienna up to be the fall guy. Get in the car, Sienna, Matteo said. It's your only way out. Sienna looked at the dark road. She looked at the distant lights of the party, where Lorenzo was likely being swarmed by reporters right now. She looked at Matteo. No, she said. She turned and ran into the woods, into the darkness, as the sound of police sirens began to wail in the distance, coming for the Sterling estate. The Milan courthouse was a fortress of gray stone and grim faces, but to Sienna Bennett, it looked like the gates of heaven. For 3 weeks, the trial of the decade had captivated Italy. The press had dubbed it Il processo del tradimento, the trial of betrayal. Every major news outlet in Europe was camped outside, hungry for a glimpse of Lorenzo Ricci, the resurrected CEO, and the mysterious American woman who stood constantly at his right hand. Inside the courtroom, the air was stale and hot. Matteo Ricci sat in the defendant's dock. The arrogance that had defined him at the Hamptons polo match was gone, stripped away like cheap paint. In his oversized prison jumpsuit, he looked smaller, deflated. He refused to look at the gallery where his family sat. Sienna sat in the front row, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Beside her, Lorenzo was a statue of calm. He wore a charcoal suit, impeccable and sharp, but his hand was resting on the bench next to hers just millimeters away. It was a silent tether keeping her grounded. The judge, a stern woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose, finished reading the verdict. Guilty on all counts of corporate espionage, grand larceny, and the falsification of financial records. A roar went up from the press gallery. The gavel banged, a sharp crack that echoed in Sienna's chest. But the judge wasn't finished. She raised a hand, silencing the room. Furthermore, the judge continued, her voice cutting through the murmurs. In light of the evidence provided by the defense, specifically the recovered digital archives of the late Anthony Bennett, the court hereby officially exonerates Anthony Bennett of all previous charges of embezzlement leveled against him in 2010. The record will be corrected. His estate is to be restituted. Sienna stopped breathing. The world narrowed down to a single point. Exonerated. It was the word she had been fighting for since she was 14 years old. It was the word that had driven her to work 3 jobs, to study late into the night, to learn the language of the people she thought were her enemies. She felt a hand cover hers, warm, firm, and calloused. She looked up. Lorenzo wasn't looking at the judge. He wasn't looking at his cousin being led away in handcuffs. He was looking at her. His dark eyes were filled with an intensity that made her shiver. He squeezed her hand, a silent acknowledgement of the mountain they had climbed together. They walked out of the courthouse into a blinding flash of cameras. The questions were shouted like gunfire. Mr. Ricci, how do you feel about your cousin's sentencing? Signorina Bennett, is it true you are the new COO? Lorenzo, is there a romance between you and your assistant? Lorenzo stopped on the stairs. He raised a hand and the shouting died down. He approached the bank of microphones. My cousin has received justice, Lorenzo's host said, his voice deep and carrying easily over the crowd. But today is not about him. Today is about correcting the sins of the past. He turned slightly, gesturing for Sienna to step forward. She hesitated, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was used to being the invisible waitress, the shadow in the corner. But Lorenzo's gaze was an anchor. Come to me, it seemed to say. She stepped up to the microphones. This is Sienna Bennett, Lorenzo announced to the world. Without her courage, Ricci Automotive would not exist today. But more importantly, her father, Anthony Bennett, was a man of honor who was wrongly accused by my family. Today, we restored his good name. That is the only victory that matters. He looked at her, and for a split second the cameras, the reporters, and the noise vanished. It was just them. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking. Lorenzo didn't care about the cameras. He reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair from her forehead. "Let's go home, Sienna." "Home?" The word felt strange on her tongue. For the past month, home had been a suite of guest rooms at the Villa Ricci in Portofino. It was a place of breathtaking beauty, perched on a cliff overlooking the Ligurian Sea. The air smelled of lemon blossoms and salt water, and the only sound was the cicadas singing in the olive groves. It should have been paradise, but as the adrenaline of the trial faded, a new, quieter anxiety began to take root in Sienna's heart. 3 days after the verdict, Sienna was in the villa's library, packing a cardboard box. The library was a masterpiece of old-world charm, with floor-to-ceiling mahogany shelves and a view of the harbor that could make a poet weep. Sienna was trying not to weep, for a different reason. She placed her few personal belongings into the box: a framed photo of her parents, her dog-eared Italian dictionary, and the worn notebook where she had kept her father's secrets. "What are you doing?" The voice came from the doorway. Sienna froze. She didn't need to turn around to know it was Lorenzo. Even in a house this big, she could always sense when he was nearby. The air seemed to change, becoming charged with electricity. She turned. Lorenzo was leaning against the doorframe. He had traded his suits for a white linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up and navy trousers. He looked younger, lighter, the weight of the company finally off his shoulders. He held 2 glasses of wine. "I'm packing," Sienna said, forcing a cheerful tone that sounded brittle even to her own ears. Lorenzo walked into the room, his brow furrowed. He set the wine glasses down on the desk. "Packing for a trip? I thought we discussed going to Capri next week." "Not for a trip, Lorenzo," Sienna said. She looked down at the box. "I'm packing to leave, to go back to New York." The silence that followed was heavy. Lorenzo walked around the desk until he was standing directly in front of her. "Why?" he asked. It was a simple question, but it carried a weight of confusion and hurt. "The trial is over," Sienna said, wringing her hands. "Matteo is in jail. Your company is safe. The transition to the new board is complete. You have a new CFO starting on Monday." She took a breath, trying to steady her own. "My contract. My role here was to help you fight this war. The war is over, Lorenzo. You won." "We won," he corrected sharply. "Okay," Sienna conceded. "We won. But that doesn't change the facts. I'm a waitress, Lorenzo. I have a bachelor's degree I never used and a studio apartment in Queens that I'm probably being evicted from as we speak. I don't belong in this world. I don't belong in a villa in Portofino." "You belong where you choose to be," Lorenzo said. He reached out, his fingers grazing her arm. "And you have proved you can navigate this world better than people born into it." "That was adrenaline," Sienna argued, pulling away slightly. She couldn't let him touch her. If he touched her, she would crumble. That was survival mode. "But now, what am I supposed to do here? Be your house guest forever? I can't live off your charity, Lorenzo. I spent my whole life clearing my father's name because I wanted to be free of debt, free of obligation. If I stay here, I'm just a charity case." Lorenzo stared at her, his jaw tightening. He looked frustrated, like he was trying to solve a complex equation and failing. "Is that what you think this is?" he asked, his voice low. "Charity? What else could it be?" Sienna asked, tears stinging her eyes. "I'm the daughter of the employee you thought stole from you. You felt guilty, so you helped me. We helped each other. It was a transaction." "A transaction?" Lorenzo repeated flatly. "Yes," Sienna lied. She had to lie. She loved him so much, it felt like a physical ache in her chest. She loved the way he drank his espresso in the morning standing by the window. She loved the way he switched to Neapolitan when he was passionate. She loved his fierceness and his hidden gentleness. But she couldn't stay and watch him eventually realize that she wasn't enough for him. She couldn't bear to see the day when he looked at her and saw only the waitress who knew too much. It was better to leave now, while the memory was perfect. "I booked a flight for tonight," Sienna said, grabbing the box. "The car is coming in 10 minutes. Lorenzo didn't move. He stood there watching her, his face unreadable. "Fine," he said. The word was like a slap. Sienna flinched. "Fine," she repeated. "Goodbye, Lorenzo." She walked past him. He didn't stop her. He didn't grab her arm. He didn't say stay. She walked out of the library, down the grand marble hallway and out the front door. The warm Italian sun felt cold on her skin. The drive to the Genoa airport was a blur of coastline and tears. Sienna sat in the back of the town car, staring out the window, memorizing the landscape she would never see again. She checked in for her flight, went through security, and sat at the gate. She felt hollow, like someone had reached inside her chest and scooped out everything vital. It's for the best, she told herself. He's a billionaire CEO. You're Sienna from Queens. It was a fairy tale, and fairy tales end. Passenger Sienna Bennett, please report to the gate agent immediately. The intercom crackled. Sienna frowned. She picked up her bag and walked to the desk. Is there a problem with my ticket? She asked the agent. The woman behind the desk smiled a little too widely. No problem, signorina. There is just a slight change in your itinerary. Please follow me. Change? Sienna asked. I didn't request a change. It is an upgrade, the woman said, opening the door to the jet bridge. But instead of leading her down to the commercial plane, she led her out a side door, down a set of stairs, onto the tarmac. A sleek black helicopter was waiting there, its rotors spinning slowly. The logo on the tail was a silver falcon, the crest of the Ritchie family. Sienna's heart skipped a beat. She stopped. I'm not getting on that. The pilot hopped out. It wasn't the usual pilot, it was Lorenzo. He was wearing aviation sunglasses and a headset around his neck. The wind from the rotors whipped his dark hair around his face. He looked furious and magnificent. He marched over to her, grabbing her suitcase from her hand and tossing it into the back of the helicopter. Get in, he shouted over the noise of the engine. What are you doing? Sienna shouted back. I'm going to New York. No, Lorenzo yelled. You are not. You are coming with me because you are stubborn and you are an idiot, and I apparently have to scream to make you understand. Understand what? Lorenzo stepped closer, invading her personal space. He took off his sunglasses. His eyes were blazing. You think this was a transaction? He shouted. You think I let you into my life, into my family's secrets, into my mind because of a contract? You didn't stop me from leaving? Sienna yelled back, tears spilling over again. Because I needed to get the ring, Lorenzo. Roared, Lorenzo corrected. You think I let you walk away because I needed to get the ring? Sienna blinked. The noise of the helicopter seemed to fade. What? Lorenzo reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box. He looked around at the tarmac, the fuel trucks, the confused ground crew. This is not how I planned this, he muttered. I wanted sunset, I wanted wine, I wanted music, but you are always running. He looked at her and his expression softened. The anger drained away, leaving only raw vulnerability. Sienna, he said, his voice dropping, though he still had to shout to be heard. My life before you was a boardroom. It was numbers, it was slants, I was surrounded by people, but I was alone. No one understood me. They heard the words, but they didn't hear the meaning. He took a step closer. Then you walked into that gala with a tray of water and told me the truth in the dialect of my mother. You didn't just translate a contract, Sienna. You translated me. He opened the box. Inside sat a ring that caught the sunlight. A deep ocean blue sapphire surrounded by diamonds, set in antique platinum. This was my mother's, Lorenzo said. She told me to give it to the woman who would fight for me when I was too weak to fight for myself. She told me to give it to the woman who would be my equal. He got down on one knee on the hot tarmac. The ground crew gasped. I don't want an executive liaison, Lorenzo said, looking up at her. I don't want a business partner. I want you. I want the waitress who throws water at translators. I want the daughter who loved her father enough to take on an empire. I want Sienna. He took a deep breath. Senza di te, non vedo nulla. Without you, I see nothing. Marry me, he said. Don't go back to New York. Build a new empire with me or just sit on the terrace and drink wine with me. I don't care what we do as long as we do it together. Sienna looked at the man kneeling before her. She looked at the ring. She looked at the helicopter that he had flown himself just to chase her down. The fear that she didn't belong evaporated. She realized then that she didn't belong in New York or Portofino or anywhere specific. She belonged with him. She dropped to her knees on the asphalt, ruining her stockings, not caring a bit. You're crazy, she sobbed, laughing through the tears. You hijacked my flight. Is that a yes? Lorenzo asked, a grin breaking through his anxiety. Yes, she whispered. Then she shouted it. Yes! See? Lorenzo laughed, a sound of pure joy. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, deep and hard, right there on the runway, with the smell of jet fuel and the roar of the engines around them. It wasn't the romantic cliffside proposal he had planned. It was messy and loud and chaotic. It was perfect. 6 months later, the opening of the new Ricci manufacturing plant in Turin was a global event. The press was there in droves. Lorenzo stood at the podium cutting the red ribbon. The company was thriving, expanding into green energy, leading the market. "I would like to introduce the president of our new global operations division," Lorenzo said into the microphone. Sienna walked onto the stage. She wasn't wearing a waitress uniform. She was wearing a tailored Armani suit that looked like it was made of liquid silver. She looked powerful. She looked happy. She took the microphone. She looked out at the sea of faces, executives, workers, journalists. She began her speech, but she didn't start in English, and she didn't start in standard Italian. She looked at the factory workers in the front row, the men and women who kept the company alive, and she smiled. "Buongiorno a tutti," she said. "Good morning, everyone. We are here to work and to build the future." The workers cheered. They understood her. Sienna felt a hand on her back. She turned to see Lorenzo standing just behind her, applauding the loudest of them all. He winked at her. She winked back. They had built a life where no translation was necessary. They spoke the only language that mattered now. In the glittering chaos of a Manhattan ballroom where billion-dollar deals hung by threads of trust and betrayal, Sienna Bennett stood as a quiet reminder that the most powerful language is not money, power, or even perfect Italian. It is truth spoken from the heart. A young waitress carrying invisible burdens, grief for a wrongly accused father, mountains of debt, and the weight of a secret identity, she could have stayed silent, invisible, safe. Instead, when Lorenzo Ricci, a man feared across continents, stood alone and cornered by lies, Sienna chose to whisper 5 words in the rough Neapolitan dialect of his mother. Words that shattered a deception, saved an empire, and cost her everything she had carefully built. She didn't speak for reward or recognition. She spoke because silence would have meant watching an honorable man be destroyed. That single act of courage, of refusing to let a lie stand when the whole world was watching, unraveled years of pain, exonerated her father's name, and turned a ruthless CEO into a man capable of love. This story pierces the soul because it shows us how often we hide our truth out of fear. Fear of losing our place, our safety, our carefully constructed masks, while the people who need honesty most are left drowning in silence. Sienna teaches us that real power isn't in wealth or status. It's in the terrifying, beautiful choice to be seen, to speak the hard truth even when it might cost you everything. In a world that rewards conformity and punishes vulnerability, her courage reminds us, the moment we stop hiding who we are, we become the light someone else has been desperately searching for. Sometimes the greatest risk is not speaking up. It's staying quiet when your voice could change everything. What truth have you held back that still weighs on your heart? Have you ever spoken up when it was hardest? And what happened after? Share your own stories of courage and truth in the comments below. They matter more than you know. If Sienna's journey moved you, reminded you that kindness and honesty can rewrite destinies, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We're telling more stories like this every week to remind the world that hearts still win. Let's keep believing in the power of truth together.